Right, everyone, thanks for joining. Those of you who are still coming in, please come sit closer to me. Distance between us hurts my feelings. Come on. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Luca Bandini, and for the past 5 years, I have worked as a solutions consultant for Tableau, based in our London office. As part of my role, a significant portion of my time is dedicated to helping our customers along their journey to establish a culture of analytics and self-service at scale in their organizations. The importance of data to the modern enterprise is no longer a topic of debate. The sheer volume of data that organizations capture, store, and organize continues to grow at an astonishing pace. Suddenly, every company is a data company, and more people rely on data every day to perform their daily duties. This, for data people like us, presents both a challenge and an opportunity. An opportunity, I think, because the technology exists to empower these people to use data every day and to empower their daily jobs with data. A challenge because technology is simply not enough. Choosing the right software is, of course, a great first step, and the fact that you're all at Tableau conference gives me the confidence that you have done that first step, you've taken that first step. But it's not enough. If you want to make the most out of these investments, it is also crucial to change the way that our organizations use data by promoting new behaviors and inspiring confidence in our data platforms. The traditional approach to BI and analytics simply can't scale quickly enough to meet the demands for fast insights that organizations have nowadays. Based on what I've learned in my experience with my customers, companies don't just go from a traditional approach to BI to what we call a modern approach overnight, though. This just doesn't happen. On the contrary, reaching the status of what people call an analytically empowered or data-driven organization, where users are both competent and confident enough to self-serve, is typically a journey that involves the efforts of a lot of people and of a lot of processes. At the center of all of this, acting as a foundation without which self-service analytics at scale simply cannot be achieved, is governance. And governance will be the main focus of today's session. We'll learn what are the pillars for our proposed modern governance framework that is designed to support self-service at scale. We'll talk about how different roles will need to be identified within organizations and how they can all contribute to the health of this system, to the health of a deployment like this. Then we'll share some recommendations on how to govern data and analytical content, and on how governance models can evolve to meet the needs of the business. And of course, we'll try to do all of this in the context of the Tableau platform, with the goal of understanding how the various components of the platform can be utilized to achieve that synergy of activities that is absolutely fundamental for this to work. If I can give you one piece of advice about this session, there's going to be quite a lot of content that we're going to cover. Try not to focus too much on understanding every single detail of the process that we're going to go through, but rather try to understand, what does this mean for you? Where are you now in your organization? What does this mean for your team? What does it mean for the people that you work with? What does this mean for you as an individual? Where are you within this data journey? What are the things that you are doing well? What are the things that you're not doing at all? And as we've seen announced today, this morning, on this very stage, we now have the Tableau blueprint to help you along this journey. So try to identify the things that you think you should be working on. And then there will be plenty of material for you to get some help along this journey. So don't necessarily take a lot of notes or take pictures, because a lot of material will be there for you to help you. As we said in the beginning, choosing the right software is definitely a great first step, but that's not enough. And that also doesn't just include your BI application. If you're working with data, if you're working on transformation projects that are aiming at making you data-driven, you're very likely to be working on platforms to transform your data, platform to secure your data, platform to host your data. And in order to integrate all of these technologies and take advantage of them, it is important to have an organization that is able to rely on a very, very solid analytical platform on top of that. With regards to Tableau, while smart, easy analytics have always been at the core of what we do, over the years we have developed a set of functionalities around our analytical core that help organizations deliver insights in a very robust, scalable, and governed environment. The Tableau platform has grown to include products like Tableau Prep and Tableau Prep Conductor that help you transform and keep your data clean and secure and fresh, bringing data preparation capabilities to a new generation of people that would have never undertaken those responsibilities before. We also have things like Ask Data on the complete other end of the spectrum, where we have users that are business users that would have never even imagined of doing analytics by themselves, asking those questions with natural language. And has everybody seen the keynote this morning? Are you all here? Right, so you've probably seen how Tableau is investing heavily and expanding on pretty much all of these things. We have new smart analytical capabilities coming with things that will help you explain the data behind a certain insight. We have Project McKinley, which will help you scale your systems faster. We have the Tableau Catalog, which will help you understand where is data coming from, where is it flowing into. So all of these things will help along this journey. But again, robust governance is one of the main foundational elements without which none of this can work. So let's see what we mean when we talk about it, and when we talk about a governance framework that can promote a sort of a modern analytics workflow as opposed to something old. The traditional models are, in my opinion and in my experience, quite linear. There's a flow of content that starts with someone in IT, probably someone in data, that understands the complexity of the systems, the complexity of the data, and who's tasked with developing content, creating content for people on the other end of the spectrum to then consume this content. And again, this is not scalable. It just doesn't scale when you have all the responsibilities concentrated in the hands of a few selected individuals. And also, analytics just don't occur in this linear fashion in the world. It's more likely to be an endless cycle where you have people contributing with different things to this process. At the center of this cycle, you have three personas. You have an IT professional, you have the end user, of course, and then you have the content creators, the authors of content, who often share, all these people often share some components of this flow. But to try to bring this to life, let me try to apply a real-life scenario to this. Let's start at the top. Let's say you are an analytics sales rep, and you're a sales rep, and you just received an email with your latest report, which includes the sort of the monthly forecast for your next period. You drill down to see your products, but then you realize that it would be beneficial to see this by region rather than in the way that it's been sent to you. So by interacting, you discover this. And then you find out that you probably want to make some changes to this. So you discover that you have the power to build something that is more valuable, that will help more people. And so you share this in an environment where other people in your team might be able to access it, and hopefully they like it. Hopefully people find benefit by using the things that you've created yourself. And then if there are some people looking after this process and making sure that this content is being checked and properly monitored, they can then decide, okay, this is probably better than the one we had created before. This is probably better than the one that we have officially published. So why don't we make this our official content? And so the circle starts again from the top, where now people, business users, have access to the insights, not only designed by IT or experts or analysts, but also by the people that could bring those additional insights based on their experience of the day-to-day operations of their teams. And one of the things that I really liked about this morning was the comment by Homa from Credit Suisse, where this process not only serves the users in the right way, but they also feel empowered. She made a comment around someone feeling so proud and excited that some of their content made it to the official sort of sharing platform and that other people could use it. So this also empowers people, and it makes them feel involved in the process, and they can make an impact beyond their daily duties. Also, in sort of the pre-Tableau world that a lot of my customers still live in, with the traditional model that we'll discuss later, if this was even possible, it would literally have taken months or more for someone to make an impact and change something that is officially in production. I don't know if any of you have had that experience, but to make things like change requests, I see nodding, change requests, and then the BI team has to go back and fix it, and then maybe eventually in a month it will become available to others, but then it's too late. In a month, who knows if that's still relevant. We should have something quicker, and the good thing about the Tableau platform is that the time element is taken care of by the platform. You will see how doing these things within the platform takes seconds. The only things that are impacting your ability to do this at scale are the processes. So how you set up your processes and delegate some of the processes to other people. And that's why the next topic that we're going to cover is extremely important. It's the title of the session, self-service. Specifically, we want to talk about governed self-service. Governed self-service is designed to bring you a balance of control and empowerment, designed to meet the demands of what we described so far as the changing data landscape that is growing in size and growing in demands. Through governed self-service analytics at scale, you can empower business users to ask and answer their own questions. That way they can ask more questions. They don't have to wait for those answers to be given to them, so they can ask more. And these questions will be more relevant to their daily jobs, and they will be helping them make smarter decisions. Secondly, we can empower users to share those insights, collaborate with their colleagues, and allow others to benefit from their intuitions and from their analysis. And again, helping people feel empowered to make a difference, not only with their daily work, but for the larger business. Last but not least, in order for all of this to work, we need to make sure that the data is absolutely accurate, trusted, and secure. And if you're relieving your IT resources and your data experts from all of those tasks that are more commonly associated with the distribution and creation of content, then they can focus on things that are more important, and they can really use their skills to make sure that your data layer can be trusted by the entire organization. So let's talk a little bit more about governance, and let's dive into our proposed governance framework. At a very high level, these are the two pillars of governance that we mentioned in the agenda before. So we have data governance, covering things like data security, data quality, metadata management, and a few more. And then content governance on the other end, things like content promotion, certification, making sure that the right permissions are assigned, the right authorization is given to people, and then that we're extremely aware of how content is being utilized. The Tableau governance framework encompasses the people who understand and comply with these established controls, the data and content management processes, and Tableau's supporting capabilities. And again, the technology, Tableau, is only a piece of this. You need to be aware of all the other elements. So combining this, the people, the technology, and the process, you can create a foundation for accountability and really enable access to secure and trusted data throughout the entire organization. So acknowledging that various levels of governance are required, these principles can then be applied ad hoc to any kind of data problems, to any kind of team, regardless of where it falls under the governance spectrum, whether you're looking at very sensitive financial data or HR data or something that you want to share with the rest of the organization. You have to be able to be flexible and rely on people to be smart and apply the right policies. So before we dive in, I want to discuss some of the structures, technological structures, and roles that can support this. Let's start from the roles. Let's take a look at some of the users and the roles that actually align very well with our user-based subscriptions that some of you might be familiar with. First, we have creators. Creators are really the power users in your organization. Look how cool they are. They really understand the context. They really understand how to leverage Tableau to create and publish data sources. They can author dashboards that are intended for use by others. And they typically have access, both in terms of skills and actual privilege and permission to do that, to all of your company's data, to all of your company's data sources. They can connect to those directly. And so they can create that metadata model, that metadata layer that will help support everybody else. If you think about the flow before and the technology, these people typically have access to all of your Tableau products, and they're involved in pretty much all of those steps of the modern analytics workflow that we described earlier. And then you have explorers. Explorers are likely a larger percentage of your population compared to your creators. These are often people that are curious. People in your organization that are curious about data, they want to be a little bit more informed about their own business, and they often have a lot of questions, changing by the minute, and they need more answers. These people should be empowered to access content that has been created, dashboards, views, data sources, interact with them, but also edit them. If you think about our sales rep before, making a discovery on how to change the way a standard report had been created that then ended up benefiting the rest of the user base. If you're in IT, which I think a lot of you are, I was talking to people earlier, raise your hand if you're identified sort of with an IT organization. If you're in IT, these are the people that today are very likely to be coming to you with questions on, how do I get access to this? How do I get access to this data? Can you change the way that this report behaves? And so again, if you think about your organization, if you take a step back and think, okay, how does this impact me? How does this influence my work? Then think about how relieving yourself from the stress and the volume of work associated with these things could help you focus on other things as well. And then at the end of the spectrum, you have sort of more casual consumers and users of data, your viewers. These people may need access to a handful of reports. They can typically get the answers that they need by simply filtering or interacting with dynamically created content. But this doesn't mean that they don't contribute to the cycle. By analyzing and understanding how these people are consuming content, and we saw this morning during the keynote some of the things that we're doing to make this possible even with Ask Data, where you'll be able to know how people are engaging with this content, what questions are people asking. By knowing what people want to know about your data, you can then shape sort of the next level, the next version, the next revision of your entire data policy. If you think of viewers, they're, again, likely to be limited to viewing content, but ideally, we want to promote them to be something closer to an explorer. And we see that happening all the time. People sort of overestimating their viewer deployment, only to understand that people have actually a bigger appetite for data, and if they're given the right processes and they trust the data and they trust the technology, they can then become explorers and self-serves a little bit more. So identifying these key individuals will help us achieve what I was describing before, where we're moving away from a sort of a traditional linear approach, and we're collaborating in more of a circular approach, where creators are creating data source content and the basics for data exploration, and then publishing content that is then used by the explorers, changed by the explorers, consumed by the viewers, and then by understanding how the viewer behaviors are changing, we can then go back to the creators and help them understand what do we need to do to make this easier, to make this better for them. So before we dive into, again, the pillars of the framework, let's take a look at how Tableau Server is structured, which should help us understand how different key roles need to be identified to properly manage the content. When you install Tableau Server, or when you first open your Tableau online site, you will find, sorry, this is on the server. You will find a default site and a default project, which are highlighted in the slide. The site will be your basic collection of users, groups, and content. You can think of your workbooks and data sources. And this is completely isolated from any other groups and any other content on the same instance of your server. A project is then a container within a site to organize your content. Again, your workbooks, your views, your data sources. And specific permissions can then be applied to different users and different groups of people within any of these levels. And now you can also have nested projects, which make it a little bit easier to manage slightly more complex situations and hierarchical structures. Little trick for server admins, the permissions that you set on the default project will act as sort of a foundation for every other project that you then create. So they will act as sort of a template for any new projects to come. Tableau Server, of course, supports multi-tenancy, and so it allows administrators to create different sites on the server that then act as completely separate collections of users and content. If you're not part of a site's users, you will not even know that this site exists at all. So this hierarchical structure allows for scoped or delegated administration of the server. At the server site, at the server level, at the site level, and at the project level, as well as a very, very granular control of permissions. This is key to support one of the slightly more modern governance frameworks and models that we'll talk about later. Now that we have sort of a visual reference for how Tableau Server is organized and structured, let's take a look at these administrative roles. How can people support some of these parts? First, you have server admins. These people should be responsible only for the health of the server itself, the health of a deployment. They should be ensuring high availability of access, ensuring that hardware can scale properly, that the performance can be always satisfactory for users, and they will handle all the things like upgrades, tweaking the server parameters, and overseeing things like schedule creation so that everybody else can be empowered to do the things that they need to do. Then you have site admins who are responsible more for the daily operational tasks that are required typically for a specific department or a specific geography. And this, again, if you're in IT and you're used to managing everything, this takes a lot off your plate. If you can identify people that can take care of some of these aspects, the more day-to-day aspects of governance and management for a specific geography or a specific department, then they can self-serve on that aspect as well. Site admins, and from a permission perspective, they will have admin permissions only on their site that they're administrator for. So then again, that helps you keep that the isolation, the complete separation of roles and content in your deployment. So again, by delegating this, you can really, really relieve IT of a lot of stress. And then there's another level that can also help relieve some of the sort of responsibilities and take them away from the site level admin. You can have admin at the project level that we call project leaders. And these people will be responsible for some of those things, again, permissioning and making sure the content is up to date for a much smaller area of the server. So your sort of project content, so anything from data sources and workbooks, but limited and specific to an individual project. So by delegating some of these things to trusted key users in the organization, you can, again, make sure that all of these individuals can focus on the high priority tasks and ensure that the system, over time, will become almost self-governed. So now that we have this foundation for the different roles and structures, let's dive into the first of our two pillars of governance. So let's start from data governance. For most organizations, ensuring that the data is available, the right data is available to the right people, is absolutely critical and crucial. Often, if the business isn't empowered with data, or if there are too many restrictions and hurdles required to access the data, users will create sort of a black market. I think James made a comment about this morning, where you will see people fighting for access to data. If you try to restrict too much, they will find a way around it. They will find a way, they will not trust the system that you've set up, and they will find a way to just access this data. And then that's how you end up with people downloading data and putting it into Excel and sending it via email. And that's an absolute mess, because then you become blind from how data is actually being utilized in your organization. If you remember sort of one thing, one concept from this session today, is this thing that I learned from a customer, actually. Tried to make it this one. In a self-controlled and self-service environment, the role of governance should not be to restrict people from using things. It should be to enable people to use things. So if you start with this mindset, governance is the sort of set of activities that are needed to enable access to the right people, to the right data, rather than the opposite, which is governance is the act of restricting people from accessing data unless they have to. It's a completely different mindset, it's a completely different mentality, and it will help you avoid this sort of black market idea of people just sneaking around and trying to find their own answers in a way that, again, blinds you from how things are being done in the organization. So let's break this down, and let's start from data source management. Data source management is all about providing easy access to sources of data in compliance with your organizational data strategy, policies, and procedures. When you do this correctly, data source management can enable your users to choose from a variety of certified data sources that have been vetted for accuracy and kept fresh and secure with your most recent data. Users will be allowed to choose the most relevant data source based on the questions that they need to answer. The questions, again, change extremely quickly, so unless you have a crystal ball, it will be very hard to achieve this by just saying, this is the report, go look at it. It's a lot more flexible if you give your users the ability to access governed data sources. So what might this process look like? Let's take a look at this very, very simplified flow. First, you connect your data. You can use one of our native connectors that are available in the Tableau platform, and that gives you all the flexibility to connect to whatever database or data source you want to connect to. And next, you decide, do I want to connect live or extract? This is a major strategic decision. You cannot underestimate the impact that this will have on your users. If you make the right decision, you will make sure that performance will be good for whatever use case this data source is designed to answer and solve. You can then use sort of Tableau Desktop or Tableau Prep to build a metadata model. That's incredibly important. So let's focus a little bit more on that level. In my opinion, this is really the key aspect, one of the key aspects of data source management. Every company, and within every company, pretty much every team is different in terms of their data maturity, where they are with their data. And again, try to think of your situation, of your company, of your team. Every team will be different in terms of data needs and data maturity. So what is metadata management? What is building a metadata model? Well, the answer is it will differ. It will differ greatly depending on the maturity of a specific team, the maturity of a specific data issue that you're trying to solve. And so the activities associated with this will vary a lot. And some use cases will require a little bit more effort, a little bit more focus on data preparation, and some others will be just easier. You will just need to make sure that data is easy to access, that naming conventions are respected, and things like that. You won't need necessarily a lot of very, very heavy data preparation. So the Tableau platform allows you to autonomously define some of these things. And again, depending on where you are in the spectrum, you will have to do some of these tasks or not. They will already have been taken care of maybe in the data warehouse, and you won't have to do this for a specific project or data source. We don't have to go through all of them. Again, you will have all the material that you need to look into these in a lot more detail, but just be aware of what some of these steps might look like. And some of the more common being steps like sort of cleaning your data to make it readable, make it more usable, grouping data so that it just adapts better to what people are used to looking at. So you can adapt dimensions to what we call the shared business logic. You can add calculations, and then you can marry additional data sets to sort of integrate more insights and actually enable people to get more insights from their data sources. And Prep really helps making this a lot easier. It makes it easier to visually create these processes, the ETL processes and workflows from multiple sources of data, and allowing you to make this data ready for analysis. And this really helps you reduce the amount of time you spend preparing this data, and allows you more time to actually explore and analyze the information. Another thing that sometimes people underestimate about Prep, and that always shines when I demo it and when I explain it, is the ability to ensure the quality of data as well. Data quality can be sort of defined as an assessment of accuracy, completeness, and reliability of your data, and also how relevant it is and it can be for your decision-making processes. Data is very rarely perfect in its raw state. And so regardless of whether you decide to address the fact that the data is not clean, there will be a need for processes to be put in place to make sure that the data is clean. And the interface that Tableau Prep comes with, if you look at an example like this one, where we have some mismatching years and countries, and this is made extremely visible, extremely easy to understand from the visual element of Tableau Prep, these elements make it extremely easy to verify that your data is accurate and that your data can be trusted. Also, again, we must not forget about the security of all of this. So data is a very, very precious asset and should be treated as a very, very precious asset. The platform, as we've seen, has evolved around the analytical core to involve very, very robust and very, very easy to implement security and permissioning. Again, with the flexibility to fit into your current policies, your current procedures, your current technologies, and the different needs of different teams. We'll discuss the authorization piece later. So right now, I want to focus on the three pieces highlighted in blue. Starting from authentication. You can choose if you want to use local authentication or sync to your Active Directory. You have single sign-on options like SAML, Kerberos, and OpenID. And if you're looking to embed your analytics, like a lot of our customers are doing today, you also have trusted tickets as a really, really good option to make sure that your user access experience is completely seamless. At the data level, you can then leverage database user permissions or use one of our several options to implement your own row-level security, which allows you to publish a single data source or a dashboard while being absolutely certain that users will only ever be able to see the portion of the data that belongs to them. And then finally, at the networking level, there are many options to secure the environment, including database SSL, secure database drivers, and as Francois explained this morning, this combined with encryption at rest will give you the ability to make sure that the data is absolutely secure. So all of these things are what are currently helping our customer comply with things like internal data security policies, but also external regulations. So a lot of you might have to make sure that the data is accurate and secure, not only for internal needs, but also because it needs to be used to report outside of the company your results, and so it needs to be compliant to all of those regulations as well. Okay, so now let's talk about the other half of our governance wheel. Let's talk about content. As the use of your analytical system increases, a growing number of mission-critical business decisions will become completely data-driven. As we heard this morning, if you don't have data to back you up, you're just another person with an opinion. So we want our decisions to become completely data-driven. The effect is not only a very, very strong increase in content volume, but also a varying sort of delta of skills between users. So as you empower more people to take decisions with data, and as more people demand to be able to make decisions with data, we will have a very, very different set of users with different abilities contributing to the platform. So we need to make sure that the content itself can be governed, secured, and then can be trusted by all these people, regardless of their skill level. The content management starts with the standardization of things like naming conventions and the organization of your content using Tableau sites and projects again. This might be done again by department or maybe by geography with the help of the site admins. And then a good content management strategy should always support certified and ad hoc content, which can be easily distinguished. Again, think about the different levels of skills. You don't want people that don't necessarily have that level of data literacy to understand what is good data or what is not good data, to have that struggle. If you have too many data sources and too much content that is not governed, people will end up asking the question, can I trust this? Is this certified? Is this good? So we need to make sure that ad hoc content is allowed, but that people can very, very easily distinguish it from what we've certified. You will likely want to keep your data sources separate from your dashboards, again, in the spirit of keeping things very neat and organized. And for your certified or trusted content, you will want to identify visual best practices to make sure that, again, even the people that don't have a strong data background will be able to consume this content very, very efficiently. You can use things like descriptions and tags to help users, again, navigate this complexity and find the right content regardless of their skills. And then you must make sure that the content remains always, always fresh and always, always relevant. And this includes things like keeping data fresh, but also sunsetting stale content. One of the things that impacts performance and sort of the opinion of Tableau in a lot of the organizations that I work with negatively is the proliferation of content, the sort of completely ungoverned and uncontrolled proliferation of content, which very often is the result of sort of a lot of enthusiasm. People get this platform, it's new, they want to use it. But then if you don't bring in a little bit of governance and a little bit of control, you will end up with so many things that will be so hard for people to understand what is good and what is not. And your performance will go down, and it will be very, very hard for people to take advantage of the platform. So how does Tableau help with content management? Our project structure can be easily set up to maintain sandbox areas or ad hoc projects that are completely separate from your production projects that contain your certified content. This simplifies greatly the application of the appropriate content permissions for, again, those project leaders and those site administrators that are tasked with managing this content. And it also reduces the workload on the admins or again, your IT people that are tasked traditionally to do things around governance. One of the things that I always end up discussing with my customers is you don't really need the 3 separate environments, the sort of traditional dev, test, prod structure. This structure here is the only thing that you need to make sure that you can move content across and make sure that, again, certified, trusted content is easy to find and easy to consume for people. So let's go back to security and permissions, and now let's think of some of those things in the context of the content management. So when it comes to the content-related aspects of the security of our platform, it's pretty much all about 2 questions. The first one is authentication. Should you even be here in the system? So as we discussed, we're talking about the data security of things. It's fundamental to have the right authentication in place so that you can make sure that only the right people will be even in the system. And then if you are here, if you should be here, what should you be allowed to see? And what should you be allowed to do on the content that you see? So our governance framework on Tableau Server includes things like permissioning at the site level, the project level, even down to the view level if you want, for individual users or groups. We have some default personas that you can find on server or online when you start assigning those permissions, or you can also very, very granularly define your own capabilities by making sure that people can do exactly what you want them to be able to do on a specific piece of content. Permissions can be locked down for a certain type of content, while, for example, you might want to keep them extremely locked on your certified project for things like finance. But then if you have sandbox projects, you might want to allow people the flexibility to then override this content and create their own. Again, the permission model is very, very likely to look different for every company, even for different teams or different departments within companies. But there are some questions that you can ask yourselves to sort of help define your own model for your organization. And the most important one should be, how do we want to organize the content? Which all starts with defining the audience for a specific piece of content. So once you understand your audience, you will be able to then move to the next step, which is exploring how do we expect people within this audience to interact with this piece of content. Will a static view be enough? Sometimes it is. Is filtering enough? Is allowing people to change some parameters or do some light filtering enough to give them what they need? Or do we think that our users are more likely to want to explore the why other than the what? So will they want to have a little bit more flexibility to do that? And again, traditionally, companies start by thinking, okay, we won't need that much, and we can be very, very viewer heavy and allow people to just do some things on the dashboards that we created. But this doesn't scale. This doesn't help you scale quickly enough to let these people answer their own questions. And it's very likely that they will have those questions. And then, only after that, you can start to identify restrictions. Again, think of this as enabling before restricting. For example, this group of power users might be trusted with sharing content and saving data sources, whereas this other group of, field reps might only be allowed to view in the context of the specific project. Then, again, in Tableau Server, you can set content permissions to specify exactly who is allowed to work with each and individual content element, content resource on a particular site, and what they can do with that content. For example, again, you can sort of tightly restrict what people can do and who can access your external financial reporting content, and you might want to allow a little bit more flexibility on things like your sort of organizational development content. These permissions can again be applied at the project level, at the workbook level, and at the data source level. Each of which will have a slightly different subset of permissions that you can grant or deny users. Along with these very granular controls, Tableau provides capabilities to control content through the site roles and our role-based user licenses. On top of that, you can also create permissions, templates, and rules, like locking down permissions for certain projects, as well as rules that are applied to the owners of sites, projects, or specific content. So even if you are an owner in this area, a site admin or a server admin might decide that you have to be locked down and have only certain permissions. And again, this multiple levels of content authorization will help you empower your users, but also ensuring that the right data controls are in place. So now let's take a deeper look at what a content promotion flow might look like. As we mentioned so far many times, the flexible content structure in Tableau Server really allows you to enable users to be creative on the platform, making sure that they can answer their own questions, while still making sure that the key content is validated and certified. So the content promotion flow, again, think about the wheel that we had before, looks somewhat like this. You will have users generating analytical content within what we could define as a sandbox environment, where we can allow a lot of flexibility and a lot of freedom. And then we have people like advanced business users. Sometimes they will be your BI team. Sometimes it will be someone in IT. checking this content and promoting this content to the new areas of the server. And then after we know that this content is being used by people, appreciated by people, by really analyzing what people are doing with it, then we can say, okay, this content is now certified. So the promotion flow should look like this. And again, notice how it is really impacted by who we give access to these permissions. Who do we want to do these things? Do we want one individual in IT to be managing the entire flow? They won't know necessarily what right permissions should be applied within the context of this project, within this department. So it's more likely that we will want to delegate some of these things, some of these activities, to people that will have the rights to do this in a more controlled scope, in a smaller scope. This model, again, being extremely far from the traditional model of centrally managed distribution of content, will require some monitoring. We've discussed how we can make sure that people are utilizing this content right, but let's dive a little bit deeper in understanding how we can monitor usage patterns to make sure that we're providing users with the best possible experience, both in terms of quality and performance of the content. Tableau comes with built-in monitoring and auditing systems that allow admins to monitor broad usage patterns across different organizational business units, as well as track usage of all the published content and untrusted content. You'll probably all be familiar with this if you've managed a Tableau server before. Some of you might not know that there's also an internal audit database that records pretty much everything that happens, every user interaction that happens. And if you have access to that, you can then correlate things and get a better understanding of how people are consuming content. And then on top of monitoring metrics that are strictly related to content, Tableau Server and Online also enable you to have some pre-automated admin views that help admins keep an eye on the sort of overall health of the deployment. So this should be your looking glass into how the business is using data. What data do they use? What data do they appreciate? Which data sets are they not using? Maybe we expected, we put a lot of effort and energy and money into making sure that we were making this data set available with this very, very expensive database so that people would start using it. And then after 3 months, we find out that they're not. So why is that? Have we not promoted enough? Do they have access to an easier alternative with some other data? Are they not aware of it? Are they, again, relying on that black sort of market of data that evolves when people don't have access to these things? And that's something that happens all the time when we have Tableau customers that are coming from legacy systems. They will think that, okay, now we migrate all these users, they will start using this, and then they find out that they're not, because they were not even using the old system. They had found their own workarounds and their own ways to get access to their own insights. So content monitoring and making sure that we are extremely aware of what people are doing will help us prevent that. All right, finally, and again, I will invite you to think about where do you think your organization stands? What do you think your role is in this? I want to talk about some of the common governance models that we identify with customers, but also starting with a quick refresher on that modern analytical workflow that we understand. When we design our governance model, it is critical to keep a vision in mind. And the vision should be enabling people to work in a modern analytics sort of workflow. IT is the enabler of this modern analytics workflow. But this is primarily driven by business users and analysts through the organization. So we have to understand this dynamic. IT should not be restrict. IT should be the enabler, but then it will be the business and the analysts really driving the usage. And as we discussed earlier, this doesn't happen overnight. You can just say, okay, from now on, we've bought Tableau, and now we're a data-driven organization, and everybody go self-serve. This will absolutely fail. This can never work. So we need to understand how to transition to an old model, from an old model to a newer model. So what are these models that we typically see within our customers? Let's look at the 3 most common models, which we identify as a centralized model, a delegated model, and a self-governing model. In a centralized model, you will have a team producing data sources and dashboards for business consumptions due to the sort of complexity or sensitivity of data. All data access will be restricted to this centralized group of people. In this model, you don't have anybody directly accessing data, directly managing their creation of their own content, because of this perceived complexity of the data, which is in a lot of cases real, unless we have taken some of the steps that are necessary to make it easier. In this model, the bulk of the users will be only consumers of content. This is what we call the traditional approach, and hopefully I will have convinced you that an approach like this cannot scale if we're trying to switch from a sort of a traditional approach to BI to a modern way where people are empowered to do their own thing. The next level, slightly better sort of governance model that follows this, is what we call a delegated business model. This is the result of what we see as an increased collaboration between IT and business. You can introduce roles like the data steward, or again, those site admin roles that we defined earlier, to act as an intermediate level between IT, that traditionally owns these things, and the business. The direct data access, the access to the databases, can be restricted to some users, but then content will be made available through the work of these users. Published data sources start becoming available. So we understand that we have to empower people that have access to the data to share the access to these data sources via that metadata management exercise that we talked about earlier, so that others can then benefit from this. So in this model, we start seeing that act of modifying content. We start seeing explorers becoming proactive in the way they analyze their data and creating new content from scratch, or changing content so that it better adapts to their actual needs. And then finally, and this, again, try to think, where are you in this spectrum? I'm presenting this as three sort of siloed versions, but the reality is that it's a continuous line, and you will be somewhere in between, either a centralized and delegated model, or hopefully a delegated and self-governing model. And in this last model, what we see is there is a very, very strong collaboration between business units. IT and business are really collaborating to make sure that everybody is contributing to the health of the system. There is a use of a certified content. There is a very well-defined process of understanding what is certified, what is not. How do we take content that has been created ad hoc and promote it to certified content if it's useful? Access to data is open. Content can be created by anyone with the certification process. Again, we're not preventing people from doing things. The goal is to enable. We're enabling everybody to create content. And then we're checking the content proactively to see if it should be maybe sunsetted if it's not useful, if it's not used by anybody, or promoted to official certified content if it's then the content is being utilized by the majority of the team to empower their decision making. So again, these are sort of three macro areas. There are very, very many approaches to governance, and every organization is very likely to fall in a different point of what is actually a spectrum, and not three separate categories of governance. So yeah, try to think, where are we? Where is our organization? Are we still sort of working and operating in a model that is extremely centralized and we're not empowering people to do anything on their own? Or are we starting to do the things that are necessary to enable other models? And if we're not, what are, of all the things that we discussed today, from content management to data management, some of the things that we need to prioritize, or even understanding who the users are? Maybe we're not aware of what people want to do. What should their roles be? So try to understand what are the things that should be prioritized in your process of hopefully moving one step forward towards a self-governing system. So I know you've all had enough of PowerPoint. And so just to take a quick break before we end the session, just get out of the PowerPoint hell for a second. I just want to move to a very, very brief demo of how some of the elements of the platform can cooperate and can come together to enable this process. We're looking at Tableau Prep now. We're in Tableau Prep Builder. I have data that I want to analyze about tour. I'm part of a company that organizes tours for and concerts for artists, and we get our data in a slightly annoying format where we have different files that belong to different artists. And so with Prep, we can do all the activities that are needed to make sure that this data is consolidated. Within this flow, I'm unioning data, I'm cleaning up data source, I'm cleaning up metrics that are not useful, I'm identifying issues with some of the structure of these dimensions and grouping them, and then I'm blending this data, joining this data, and bringing in additional information that we own and that we have about the bands that we manage, the groups that we manage. So all of this requires some skills. Even though the interface makes it a little bit easier, it's easy for us to spot issues. For example, if I go into this join, there are some issues in the way that our artists are named in one data source and in the other data source, which doesn't make it easy for someone that doesn't have a background in this to sort of work with this data. But as someone that has the expertise, someone that has the capabilities to go and look at this data, I can be empowered to make these changes, not just for myself, but to produce a flow that then, through the use of things like Prep Conductor, can be kept fresh and relevant and shared with all the other people in the organization. And then, approaching this from the perspective of an explorer, I can come in to my site and access, say it again, a certified project. I've replicated in this online instance that structure of projects that we defined earlier. We have our tour analysis projects, we have a certified dashboards project, we have our sandbox project that can help me play with the data a little bit more, and then we have a data sources project, again, in an effort to keep data sources separate from our content and helping people navigate more easily to the content. So as someone that has questions about this data, questions about the artists that we manage, I can come in, open my certified projects, content, and be absolutely certain that the stuff that I'm looking at right now belongs to the certified project, which means someone has looked at it and made sure that the answers that I will get from this are absolutely accurate. So I can open this and get an understanding of sort of the distribution of our artists, where do they perform, when do they typically perform, who are the artists that we manage that are the most popular. We have Ray Charles here being the one that has had the most concerts throughout the years. But then again, this might not be enough for me. This might not be exactly what I want. I might want to make a small change to one of these visualizations because it just doesn't do it for me. It's not quite perfect for me, and I want something else instead of it or on top of it. And so if I have access to web editing, without even having to download content or going back to someone else and asking them to do this for me, I can jump into one of these charts and say, well, this one is good, but actually it's useless for me unless I have, at a glance, a very, very quick metric that tells me how many do we have. Without that, I'm losing a lot of time. I think everybody else in my team should be looking at this version. So I think this small change that I've made should have an impact on the way that people consume this content. So I can save it. I've been given permission to save as. I don't know if you can see that, but saving in the certified project is grayed out for me. I don't have that level of clearance on this project. I can make my own changes. I can propose changes to others, but I cannot overwrite any of the content that is certified, because otherwise it wouldn't be certified anymore. But I do have access to the sandbox, so I can make it Lucas Artist Analysis and save it there. So I know I want to use this one. The next time that I want to use this dashboard, I will not log into the certified one. I will go to my own. And then maybe I'll tell people in my team, I've made a small change to this. Go and check it out. See if it's useful for you. And then people will start using it, because it is useful. It's slightly easier for me to understand data from this one than it was from the other one. And so someone in IT monitoring that content and making sure that they know what is happening, they will notice that nobody's using the certified one anymore. Everybody's using this one. Why is that? They can contact me and say, what have you done? I made this change. All right, that's great. Promote this content to certified. And then we're making sure that everybody is contributing. From the person that put the data together, removing that complexity of data that we had, and creating a metadata layer and a data source that is very, very easy to use. The person that made this dashboard, of course, enabling everybody to do that first level of analytics. Myself, having made that small change. And then everybody in my team, just with their behavior, influencing the way the content owners can be aware of what the usage patterns are. And then finally, let's go back. The fact that I have created this environment where I have, let's go back here. when I have a very, very clear separation, can I get out of it? Yes. Very, very clear separation of certified content, sandbox content, and data sources. If I'm an explorer, if I'm someone that wants to go in and start something from scratch, I will have the ability to log into that project and start asking my own questions, maybe with Ask Data, maybe making sure that I can get that insight very, very quickly that I wouldn't have been able to get from the dashboard. So again, making sure that we have certified content, sandbox projects for people to go and play with, and then data sources completely separate will enable that flow of analytics where everybody is contributing in their own way and according to their own skills. So to conclude our session, I want to recap some of the key elements that have really made Tableau a standard for this modern analytics approach. Tableau Server has very many built-in features that promote security, that promote governance, that promote data exploration and collaboration. Data Server, which is a component of Tableau Server, is arguably the most powerful of these tools that you have at your disposal. For IT, Data Server satisfies those security needs, the governance, the monitoring requirements, and it really helps hide the complexity of your data architecture from the end users. It allows you to centrally manage the connections to your data or then extract this data so that you can make sure that the best approach is taken. At the same time, Data Server enables business users as well because they can then have the trust and confidence that they're using the right data. So they can explore it, they can use the dashboard that have been prepared, or they can create something from scratch on their own. So from sort of soft guidelines to firm boundaries for the usage of Tableau, every organization needs to design their own governance process, complete with very well-defined roles and very well-defined responsibilities. And again, keep in mind this concept that when IT becomes the enabler, users will then have the confidence to use the data that is being shared by IT, and IT will then will be viewed as a really trusted partner to the business, rather than some function that is trying to prevent people from doing what they want. And again, today's presentation is part of a much larger initiative by Tableau called the Tableau Blueprint, which you have heard about this morning. You will be hearing about a lot more here at conference. And this is essentially a step-by-step guide to becoming a real data-driven organization. This is designed to assist you in developing the 3 core capabilities of agile deployment, analytics proficiency, and user community that are fundamental for the health of any deployment and for this governance frameworks to be successful. Really, really hope that you enjoyed the session. I hope that some of these concepts will have resonated with you and that you'll want to experiment with some of them in your organizations. And again, thinking about where are we? What things are we doing? What things are we not doing? At what point in the spectrum of governance do we fall? So yeah, you will be able to download the blueprint. You will be able to find all the material online. I would also like to recommend these 2 sessions if you want to explore a little bit more about how to actually apply some of these security checkpoints that we've talked about very briefly today. There's a very, very good session today from my colleague Jürgen. And if you want to hear from a customer how they've implemented some of these things to promote a data-driven culture within their organization, I really recommend the session from Jaguar Land Rover. And then finally, as a tool, if you look into the app under activities, you will find under customer solutions, there's a stand out there. People will help you go through the blueprint, do an assessment, and help you understand where you are and what are some of the activities that you should be prioritizing, as well as what are some of the sessions here at conference that will help you focus on those subjects. Yeah, again, thank you very much for coming, and have a nice conference.